Hey everybody, and welcome back. Alright, well nothing to report this week, so we can actually get straight on with what we're going to do. Alright, so I've ordered all the parts for the engine, and as usual there was a couple of bits that my sort of number one supplier didn't have, so I had to get on to Peter Quick at, what is it, BSA unit singles, yes, because apart from the couple of little things that I couldn't find, one of them was a plus 20 piston. I honed the barrel to clean it up, measured it, and it came out at 84.48, and I was thinking to myself, okay, first overbore is 84.5, so although there weren't any hatch marks left, I guessed it was maybe just being rebored, but I couldn't find a plus 20. In fact, the only one I saw searching around was in Austria. But anyway, I phoned Peter Quick just to ask him and see when he was going to get some more plus 20s in, and he had a plus 20 there that he sort of didn't have on his website. Unfortunately, he measured it for me, and it was a lot smaller than 84.5, so I thought, well, that's no good. But he did have a plus 40 and he measured that, and that'll be nice. So I'll bore the barrel and we'll put a nice new plus 40 piston in it. What else? I think I was able to get everything else for the engine and all the various bearings and bits and pieces for the frame. Oh, and just out of interest, I did a search with the part number for the right hand side cover, and I found a place in the US, was it Tom's Drive Bits or something like that, and he had one reproduction right hand in fiberglass side panel for like $70. So I bought it. So we've got a side panel coming. Okay, so this week we're going to start working on the frame. I've got some things to tell you about that. We're going to do the bearings in the headstock so we can put the forks in, and we're going to sort out putting the rear wheel in the swinging arm because I've made a change there as well. So let's start by looking at the frame. Right, well, you remember that I have two B50 frames, this SS1 and an MX1, and I decided to use the SS1 because it had mostly it had these which the MX frame doesn't have for mounting the side panel. So I thought the frame number matched the engine number, which I wasn't particularly bothered about. I know it's the same in the UK, but here in the US everybody goes mad for matching frame and engine numbers. To be quite honest, I couldn't care less. But anyway, I took this big thing off here. It went on like that, and I discovered, let me zoom you in, that they drilled these holes out to 3/8. Now this is where this mounting goes on. It's got the bits on for the Audi fasteners, and it goes on like that. But it's 1/4 inch holes. They've drilled these out to 3/8. So I thought, I'm going to have to fix that. And I'm going to show you something else in a minute. I found it. Another little repair job. I thought I'll just use the MX frame. I'll drill, where are you? Zoom you out again. I'll just measure where these pins are because they're just welded in, and I'll weld some in. But then I realised that the MX frame doesn't have these two mountings on, which are for the airbox. So I thought, okay, let's just stick with this SS frame. We'll fill these holes up with weld and re-drill them. But there is one other thing that I just noticed, so let me show you that. Now I hadn't noticed this at all, but there's a great big dent in there. Can you see that? Look, I can get my finger right in it. So I don't know what's happened there. Now what I have done is I've made a few measurements. The B50 actually has a 7/16 front engine bolt, the bottom one and the back one are 3/8. But I've measured from this hole and this hole back to the mountings here and this and down to here as well. The distances seem to be the same. So if that was bashed in when the engine was in, I guess it didn't move things around because the engine was holding it. But what we will do when we repair this is I'm going to put the bottom cases in so that I can make sure everything lines up, and then we'll cut this piece out and put a nice new piece in. Alright, so that's that job. Alright, so I think the first thing we'll do is the two holes where that bracket goes. I almost forgot, but that piece has been sawn out of there as well, so we'll put a piece of tube in there just to keep that right. That's where the bolt goes through for the footrests, so we'll do that as well. First thing to do is weld up these holes. So I cleaned the metal off. If you're welding holes up like this, put a nice big piece of copper behind, because the weld won't stick to the copper, but the copper acts as A as a heat sink and B as a backing to stop your weld going through. If I just tried to weld that, particularly if it was thinner than this, what would tend to happen if you're not good is the melted edge will start to recede and suddenly you'll have a bigger hole than you started with. This way, because the copper's behind it, a lot of the heat goes into the copper, so you can just maintain a molten edge there, and also as you're filling this up, it's not going to drop through sort of because of gravity, so you're left with quite a nice flat piece at the back. So there's very little finishing work to do. So let me weld up both of these holes. Right, there's the holes welded up, and as you can see, once it's sanded they just disappear, so I can re-drill them. But I want to get them in the right place so that everything fits. Now, one of the left hand ones I've got has its fastener, so I've put it, you can see there how it locks into that spring thing. So I've put it on there, and I've decided what I'm going to do is leave drilling the holes until I've got both side panels, then I can put them on their rubber fittings so that I know that they're all on. Then I'll mark it and drill it, and then we're not going to find that the side panels won't go on and have to drill it out and weld it up and drill it again. Alright, so let's do the other piece, that bit that's missing across the bottom of the frame where the footrest through bolt goes. Right, well, so there's the new cross piece in. I've welded it a little bit on each side. I'll finish off welding that, and then that'll do for the frame, because as I say, I don't want to drill those holes till I've got the side panels so I know they're right, and I don't want to do that squashed piece up there until I can put the engine cases in and hold everything lined up. Alright, so swinging arm. Why am I showing you the wheel? Because I've discovered something with the wheel which is going to affect what we do with the swinging arm. It's changed our plan. Actually, it's going to make it easier. So you may remember I measured the wheel spindle, and it's 17mm, and this one was only, whatever it is, 16, or the other way, yes. So I was going to have to remount the swinging arm from this size to this size. Well, I was thinking about the bearings. I started thinking, well, I wonder if I can get just a different size bearing, the same outer OD but a smaller ID. So I looked at the bearings and I measured this, and it's 42mm OD. I noticed there wasn't a 42/17 bearing. So I came back and looked at it, and because these distance pieces are shouldered, see, this here is 20mm. That piece is to take it down to 17. So I thought, Well, if that's the case, why don't, because this is too short, why don't I simply use the original wheel spindle, which is the right length and everything and the right diameter, so I don't have to remount the wheel mounts in the swinging arm, and just make up, because I'll have to make up some of these in terms of the spacing part to get the wheel right. Just make a couple of these up, 20mm outside and the right size for that. So that's what we're going to do when we get round to it. But first of all, we have to do something with the swinging arm. So I've got the swinging arm out and I put it in the vise, and I thought to myself, that doesn't look right. So I put the wheel spindle in. It's bent. Either one side or the other, or both of them, are splayed out a bit. Because if I put a clamp, what I did was I put a clamp on this and I brought it in, and as I started to bring this in, that would slide through. So we're going to have to get either one or both of these to bend in a little bit. So what I'm going to try and do is do it with heat straightening. We're going to heat a little bit up here, get it to bend a bit, rather than getting it all red hot and pulling it over. We'll see if we can get it to do it on its own accord. So first of all, let's see if we can find out if the right or the left or both of them are bent. Right then, so when this is in there, the wheel spindle and this tube should be parallel, because that's the swinging arm pivot, and that's the wheel. So what we're going to do is we're going to put that on there. Right, so that's horizontal, that's level. We'll put this one in first. Can you see that one? Yeah, I think. We'll put that on there, and that is out by 1/2 degree. Yeah. I don't know if you can see that. That's out by 1/2 degree. 1/2 degree. Take that off. Put it in. This side. Let me check the bottom again. Yep, still reading 0. And that one is out by almost 1 degree, in fact over 1 degree. So they're both out a bit, but that one is out more than this one. Right? Again, let me see if I can. I'm hoping you can see these numbers. But anyway, that's 1 degree out and 1/2 degree out the other one. So what we're going to do is we'll start with this side, I think, is we'll put that in, we'll put the wheel spindle in so we can see it, and then, as I say, we'll heat it and bring it over till it's 0, and then we'll do the same with the other one, and then presumably the wheel spindle will just slide straight through the two. Right, so the idea is we're going to heat here, and then when it cools down, that little bit will shrink and it'll pull this over. Okay. Now I will turn you off because it's got to cool down all the way, and then we'll see what it comes to. Right, well, we're going to have to go old-fashioned. We were getting close and I dropped this. Now it rattles and it doesn't switch on. So that's that. Let me get an ordinary type level. Right, well, as you can see, I had to do a couple of other places to get around. This is, oh, I've moved it over now. I'll put it in the vise differently so I can do it. This one's still a long way out. This one, I had it on. I've been using a little spirit level. I had to put it on a block here to get it right. But that's fine and in the centre. And that's virtually there. So I'm going to try this side now and see if I can bring it right across. Right then. Come on now, don't fall off. That's basically there. That also is basically there, but what we've got now is it's touching the back side of this, so I can either move this one this way or this one that way. So let me do that. Right, I heated up the back side of this one to bring it over a little bit. Voila! You can remember, well, I hope you remember, it was right up, was really high. It hasn't quite cooled down yet. I might work on it a little bit more, but that's about it. So there we go. Another jobbed. I don't know if this wheel spindle is absolutely 100% straight, but that'll do me. Very good. Right, we're going to do the stem for the yokes next, but I've just noticed something which is going to give us another little job. These forks where the yokes go, one there, one up here, are a larger diameter than here. So we know the stem has got to be longer, which means the two yokes are going to be further apart. And it suddenly struck me, oh, it's not like as if the stanchion, it was a fork stanchion the same diameter all along, so I could just put them wherever I wanted. Here they've got to fall on those two pieces. Now I've had a quick measure, and with the top one right at the top and the bottom one sort of right at the bottom, it looks as if I'll be okay. But what I'm going to do is, see how thick this is? I'm going to take a 1/4 inch off that. That'll move the two yokes closer together, and it can only help. So let's go and set this up on the mill. Now there's the bottom yoke clamped down. If you're wondering what the ruler's doing there, when I clamped it down, hang on, I'm going to sneeze. No, I didn't. I found that this wasn't level front to back. So I wondered if I'd just, you know, taken a bit off with a hacksaw when I was getting in there to cut the stem out. So I got the top yoke, clamped that down, and that's the same. So that was just the right amount. Shim the front up to get that level. So now, where's my safety glasses? We will and I've got to do some winding here. I won't make you watch that. Right, well, I've touched this off, set it to 0. Alright, I'll keep on going till I take the 1/4 inch off. So there's that done. Now what I'm going to do is just use this piece of 3/4 tube. The new bearings haven't arrived, but I do have a couple of old bearings, complete with their outer races and everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this on in there, put it all together, and this is a lot longer than I need, so I'll be able to mark, when we've got this in and the top bearings on, I'll be able to mark where the top of the bearing goes, so I'll be able to mark the threaded portion for the little ring that holds it together, and then the piece that goes into the top yoke. And when that's all marked on this, I can mark it onto this, which is the thicker walled that will make the actual stem out of. And then this, as I say, I can cut the thread here, 3/4, and then we're going to thread into the end, whatever it was, 9/16, 5/8 or whatever. Actually, I've had another little bit of old age. This is going to be 3/4 fine, because we're only putting it into like a 1/4 inch piece to screw on, so we wanted enough threads. And I thought to myself, oh, now I know I've got taps and dies. I've got 3/4 fine in one and 3/4 coarse in the other, taps and dies. So I ordered a 3/4 fine die. And of course, when I go to put it in the drawer, I've got 3/4 fine dies. The tap is 3/4 coarse. So I could single point turn it, I suppose, but anyway. So let me get these bearings on and then we'll go over to the frame. First thing is put the races in. Now, the races have a curved edge to them, and the actual step that they fit on is very small. So first of all, you put in these. And they fit on that little step and give you a better landing spot for this. Now, put these in all sorts of different ways. You can put a bolt through with a couple of pieces of plate and tighten it down. I presume there's a special tool for it, but actually they're not that tight. So if you've got something that will just sit on that top edge, won't move about too much, they drive in easily enough. He says, come on now. Why is there always one? Oh, it's not going in straight, that's why. There we go. That's how it goes in. And the handy thing about that thing underneath is it moves. So if it'll still move, it's a loose enough fit that you can turn it. If you can turn it, it means you haven't got the bearing all the way down. Although you can't actually see it, but... There we go. Right, let me do the bottom one. Right, well, let's see if we can do this and hold everything together. I've put top bearing in. There needs to be a tiny little spacer in there to keep you from squishing onto the seal. We're putting that there. We're also going to put this there, because don't forget we're going to have the screw down thing here, okay? So here's our yoke with our sort of dummy stem in. So that goes in like that. That, and as I say, we're going to have that, have that. Oh, that won't go on, will it? Drat. Forgot about that. That's slightly smaller. That's going to go on there, but doesn't matter, because I can still, the important thing I can measure how thick this is. Important thing to know how far up this comes. So we're going to need the threading to start there, slightly below that. That'll do, because we're going to put, as I say, we're going to put a thin washer on there. So that's where the threading wants to come up to. And the threaded piece is going to come up to about there. I'm using the thickness of the sort of pen hole at the end to give me a little bit more, so we can give ourselves slightly more threaded portion, and then this is going to go on there, so that's going to come up to there. Now it actually wants to be slightly less than that, because we're going to put a bolt in the top with a big washer on, so we don't want the bolt to tighten up against the top of this. We want this down a little bit so it's getting pulled in. Alright, now then, the other important thing, of course, is that's on there like that. This is going to be 9.5 inches. Alright. And this is from the top of there. Whoo, it just squeaks in. Basically from here to there is 9.5 inches. I don't know whether this is going to be in focus for you or not. But from there to there, look, is 9.5 inches, because that's where it starts to be turned down. So we're all right. We're going to make it. Right, so I take this apart and then I can measure the thick walled piece and start putting threads and things like that on it. Uh-oh, I can hear you saying, why has he got 2 frames out? Right, well, slight change of plan again. Even after I'd done these couple of repairs, I found there's another dent here, but also this, I don't know if you can see that, goes down, whereas that one goes up. So I thought to myself, this frame's got dents in it underneath, it's bent on the top, I don't know if I want to use it. And we come back to the fact that the other frame's got a matching number to the engine. So the main reason I was going to use that was because of these brackets here. The only difference between these frames are the mountings, as I mentioned. These little pins for the side panels, they're for the air box, and up here these are for that aluminium box that used to hold all the electrics. Well, we're not going to use that. I decided I'm not going to use, excuse me, this great big air filter. Let's let this lorry go past. There we go. I'm not going to use that great one. I'm going to work on the same principle as electronic ignition. You can't see that, so we don't really need to use it. I'm going to make a nicer thing to go in there for the air filtration. So we're going to put this one back on the shelf and work with the other one. Right, I've taken our temporary stem out. That's this one. That's where it was in the bottom yoke. I glued it in. So that's where the bottom bearing goes to. That's the top of the top bearing. That's the bit that's going to be threaded. That's the bit that is going to go into the top yoke. So what we're going to do is, the first thing I'm going to do is, you can see this is considerably longer than it needs to be, so we're actually going to do it, see if I can show you, this way. Hang on. I'm getting a lot of light shining off the table and things like that. But anyway, so that way, you see, I can put it, I can hold it in the lathe, in the chuck, right up to there. So this is thick walled, it's strong. I'll check to see it's not running out. But basically, even though this measures sort of 749 and the bearing measures 750, the bearing's a really, really tight fit on this. So the first thing I'm going to do is just run about a thou off and check that the bearings will go on. This bit at the bottom, the very bottom bit, I'm not going to turn at all. And that'll make that a good fit in the bottom yoke. Then this bit I'm barely going to turn because I want the bottom bearing to be a good tight fit on that. This bit up to about here, I'll measure it off with the bearing, is the bit we're going to thin down. We're going to waste that so that when this is in the yoke and we put this bottom bearing on, we don't have to fight it all the way down. And then this bit where the top bearing is wants to be just a good close fit. You know, we don't want it to be a sloppy fit, but again, we've got to be able to get this in and out. We're not going to take this bearing off, but if ever we have to take these out, that bearing's got to be able to come off. So when we've done all that turning, we'll cut this to length. Well, we'll cut this to length, and then we'll thread the inside of it. Alright, and then we have to make the sort of big flat nut that screws on there. So let me put it in the lathe, take the first little bit off. So there's the first bit of turning done. I'll give myself a little bit of space here, and that's where the yoke is. That's the threaded bit, top bearing, bottom bearing, and the yoke there. So you can forget that mark. So the bearing, see, will go on. Tightish fit. But then when it gets past there, slides down, and then it's going to be tight on the bearing again, on where that's going to go. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is cut that off there. Then we're going to thread all of this 3/4 fine. Then we're going to turn this little bit of the thread off where it goes into the yoke, and we'll cut this end as well. And then we can actually, then I've got to thread the inside, and then we can bash this into the bottom yoke, weld the end up, put the bearings on. There it is, almost finished. Didn't turn anything off here, then slightly off here. That's the wasted bit. There's where the other bearing goes. That's the threaded bit, and this is the part. I can't take too much off there because, you know, we've got the thread inside as well. I've got it threaded inside, 9/16 fine. So the next thing we're going to make is the piece that will screw onto here, and we're going to make that out of a piece of this. It wants to be, I'm going to make it 1/4 inch thick, and actually this is just the right size because it's just slightly smaller than the bearing, so that'll screw on there nicely. So let's face this off, drill it 9/16, no, drill it 3/4. I'm going to tap this 3/4, so that is, hold on a second, 3/4 fine, 17.7 millimeter. So whatever 17.7 millimeter is, I'll find the appropriate drill bit. So I say we'll face this off, we'll drill it, we'll tap it, say 1/2 inch, and then we'll cut a piece off with a parting tool exactly the size we want it. Then what we need is the little cutouts for a C-spanner to go on. So when we've done this, we will put it this way up in the mill and just come in with an end mill, turn it 90 degrees, do it again 90. We'll put 4 little slots in it. Alright, well, I don't know, maybe 1/4 of an inch, big enough for the C-spanner to get. So let me put this in the lathe first. Right, I've faced it off, I've drilled a pilot hole, and I don't have a suitable size drill. This is a 17mm. The next thing I've got is too big, so I'm going to drill it to 17 and then just bore the other little bit out. I've got a very small boring bar. So let me just take this off, drill this in, and then I'll bore it. Excuse me. Okay, now I need a boring bar. Right, now this little boring bar is one of my mistaken purchases because it's left hand. So I have to run the lathe in reverse so that it's going that way. But what it does do very nicely, I think I mentioned this before, is instead of having to deduct as you come in this way to how much you're taking off, you are still pushing it in. So let's see what we've got. 663, I want 697, so let's touch it off first. To there, set this to 0. Oh. Look, you all watched me put it in forward, didn't you? Now we're shaping. We're going to go in a bit more. Okay, I've got that zeroed. $670, and I want $697, so that's to 27 off. That's 13.5. Okay, in reverse. Probably flexing a little bit, so we'll do a spring cut. I'm only winding them by hand because I don't want to, it's going into a blind hole. There it is. Anyway, let me finish off and I'll bring you back in a second. Right, that came out at 698, so I'm quite happy with that. Now it struck me, of course, that the tap I'm going to use has a lead in, a little bit too much, so I'm going to part this off at a 1/4 inch, then put it back in here, and then we'll tap it. So let me get it parted off. So there's the piece. think it's thicker than I need it. You know, when I think of the size of the ones on the Japanese bikes, they're only maybe 1/8 of an inch thick. But anyway, we can always make it thinner if need be. So now I'm going to that in there like that. Oh, where's it gone? Oh, there it is. To get that nice and flat. See what it looks like. I always forget to put this bloody thing in gear. Right. That looks lovely. Okay, let me get the tap. Of course, I don't have a tap holder big enough for a 3/4 tap, but fortunately it had the little hole in the end, so I got my sprung thing in there to keep it straight. And luckily, of course, we only have to do a few threads. Oh, hang on, let me put that in low. There we go. Ooh, that was my elbow if you heard that crack. Whenever I give blood, the nurse keeps saying, straighten your arm, and I keep saying to her, that's as straight as it goes, dear. There we are. That's in nicely now, I think. Alright, let me finish this off. Right, the last stage. I've got it threaded. I've marked where I'm going to put the slots. There's a parallel in there underneath it, so don't worry, it's not going to push down. Right. That's good. We're going to go in. Well, how far shall we go in? We'll go into about there. Mark that as 0. Yeah. We need to go. Yeah, that's fine. Take that down to 0. Lock it off. And there we go. we go. So I'll just turn it round and do 3 more of them. And there it is, all finished. So that goes on there. The first bit just jumps over, but then it gets into the proper threads. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the old bearing on here, build it up temporarily, because I want to put the top yoke on, and mark this to cut it off. I'm doing it all temporarily so that I can cut that off and then face it off in the lathe, and then we'll put it all together permanently. Right, well, here we go. So there's that on there. Goes on there. And that goes on there. Right. And then that one, now this is now a loose fit. So I'm going to end up sleeving this, I think, a little bit. Oh, actually, that's just the right length. Hold on. And the last thing is for that to screw in there, which it did a moment ago. There we go, see? Alright, so let me go and weld this into the bottom of there, then we'll put the new bearings in. And there that is welded into the bottom of there, so let's put some bearings on. Right, let's see how this goes together. And before anybody mentions it, no, there isn't any grease on the bearings. There will be when we put it together finally. So there's that one on there. That's going to go up there like so. Then that. Come on now. Now all the nice people have just watched you going on there, alright, so stop that. So that goes on there. That. Very nice. Then that goes on there like that, and as I say, at the moment it's a bit loose. Well, will you believe it? That's gone further through. Would you credit it? I didn't have it all the way in. Bugger. See, as I say, I don't want this to stick out the top of that. When I fasten this bolt down, I want it to hold that against this. So I've got to cut a bit off this now and dress it up with a file, which is going to be a bit awkward. Certainly not as easy as doing it in the lathe. I knew this was longer than I needed it to be. So, hey. So how much do we want to take off? Well, it's sticking out 1/8, so we'll take another 1/8 off because I've got the thickness of a washer. Right, so we will take 1/4 off. Right, let's try again. That's better. And that's going to, actually that doesn't need to be anywhere near as long as that, does it? There we go. Now then, where's my tape measure? That's fun. Oh, it's right there in front of me. So, do you remember we wanted less than 9.5 inches? 9 1/4. Okay, let me move you and we'll see if I'll put some forks in. Right, ho. nice. Very nice. Very nice. I did have a comment about the length of the forks. Perhaps, I don't know if they look longer than they really are, but they're only about ½ an inch longer than the BSA ones. I guess the tops must be even slightly narrower than the bottoms, because the top one went through really easily. And there we go. Now these are the type of forks that have the damping in one side and the spring in the other. So I think the spring must be in this side. Yep. Ooh, does move, but back. Actually these are adjustable as well, so they're a pretty good pair of forks. Alright, we've got forks. So we can put the front wheel in. Now then, one of our major, in fact our only, let me move you up slightly, our only large piece of fabrication is going to be this front end. Because of course we're going to need a headlight, and we're going to need a speedometer, and we're going to have a couple of switches up here. You'll see the switches later on. I've decided how I'm going to do that, but of course we don't really have anywhere to fasten them, so I'm going to make a plate at the top, almost a little cowl, that's going to have a speedometer in it, and it's going to have the light switch and the ignition switch, because I've got a nice round, I don't like flick switches. I think they look as if somebody fitted them afterwards, even when they're the factory ones. So I've got one of those nice, I'll show you, you press it. It's funny, it's got a little tumbler thing inside, but it's only round, it's like a round black button. You press it on and you press it off. And I managed to find a smallish, or at least it looked it in the photograph, sort of tubular shaped ignition switch. So I'll have them one on either side of the clock, just down in there, and we'll cowl it in a little bit. What we're going to do for the headlight, I'm not sure. I might make like the ordinary BSA ears, because we've got hopefully about the same thickness there as there. So with a couple of O-rings, everything made the right length, crushed up in between the two yokes, they would be fine. Alright, that's a day's work. So I'm going in. Right, well, seeing as I've got the forks in, oh, this is the next day by the way. I put the tank on to make sure nothing was going to catch, and the box arrived, big box, and it had things like the proper B50 handlebars. I got a pair of Hagen rear units so they match up with the Girling look, and various bearings and stuff arrived. And I also went to Mike's, and well, the other day I got the hydraulics for this and I got the handlebar clamps. And as soon as I put them on, I looked at them, and it's not a big problem. I'm not even sure if it is a problem, but I think I might have to slim the nut, not the nut, this bolt head, because I think it's just the handlebars might just touch the top. So I'll take that out and take 1/8 of an inch off. It's a big nut, so it's you know, it's not one you have to really pull up tight, so that'll be fine. So next job is, let's put the front wheel in, get it looking a bit like a bike. Right, well, let's see if we can get a wheel in. Put a new tyre on it. Now there's a couple of spaces here and I'm not exactly sure where they go. Maybe they both go on this side. Excuse me. back end of the frame with a strap. I think that goes like that, because this end's fatter than that end, so it can push right through and be the spacing piece on. Come on. I just pulled you out of there. Ah, there it goes. These wheel spindles are alloy, and even the nuts are alloy. God, hang on. I'm gonna have to get something to give this a little bump. Okay, we're back with our plastic hammer. Gone in. That doesn't look right. Let me look at this a bit more. Right now, I have looked at it a bit more, and there's a story to tell, which I'm going to tell you right now. So because I was having trouble, I took the spindle out of the wheel and just put it in here. And it wasn't long enough. With it flush this side, the threaded end didn't come out of here. So I thought, that's weird. So I phoned Mike and said, here, this spindle you gave me is the wrong size. Which surprised him, because you know it was a rolling chassis he took apart. So I was going to see him the next day. So I took it with me, and by I got there for our coffee and donuts, he got the parts book out and checked, and he said, well, I've got a brand new wheel spindle anyway for it. He gave me it, and I said, wait a minute, because I'd taken the original one with me, it's the same size. So now poor Mike was really scratching his head, and he said, okay, I have another pair of forks and wheel and stuff, I'll put the forks in the yokes, put the wheel in and see what's what. Then we got talking about speedometers, because it suddenly struck me there wasn't a drive for a speedometer, and I'd been looking at GPS type ones. And he said, yes there is, there's a little hole on one side, and they did make a speedometer that mounted up on the yoke, so he has the long cable and everything. So I thought, great. So just out of interest, when I was at home, I looked at some pictures to look at the speedometer, and I suddenly noticed that the disc brake was on the left. I had it on the right. Now the reason I had it on the right was because of these. These are the mounting bolts for the Mudguard mounts, and I'd assumed they go on the outside, but when I looked, they don't, they go on the inside. And actually the outside of each of these castings got the Paoli symbol cast in it. And also when I looked, these are slightly offset the centre line. So I swapped the forks over, and these were 3/4 of an inch closer together, which was ample to mean I did have the right wheel spindle. So that was annoying. But what was more annoying was, because I thought it was the wrong wheel spindle, I left it at Mike's. So we can't put a wheel in. Alright, so we'll make that it for this week. Next week we will, if bits come, we'll put the swinging arm in and things like that, and we've got all sorts of other bits and pieces we can do. So until then, stay safe and enjoy yourselves.